Welcome to Educational Bedtime, where history becomes your gentle companion through the night. If you find these journeys into the past soothing and enlightening, consider subscribing to join us on more historical adventures designed to ease your mind toward rest. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back to a time when the morning mist rose from Lake Texcoco, when the Great Pyramids cast their shadows across a city of nearly 200,000 souls, and when survival itself was an art form that few mastered completely. We'll walk through 4 distinct glimpses of this world: the grinding reality of market life, the tragic fall of an emperor, the mysterious calendar that governed existence, and the golden luxury of those who ruled from above. Tonight, we're traveling back 5 centuries to a world that would challenge every comfort you know. Imagine stepping into the heart of Tenochtitlan, the magnificent Aztec capital, where the largest market in the Americas buzzed with life, death, and everything in between. This is a journey into a civilization that created breathtaking beauty alongside brutal necessity, where every day brought both wonder and terror in equal measure. Let the rhythm of this ancient world wash over you as we begin our journey into the past, where every detail reveals how different life once was, and how grateful we can be for the simple comforts of our modern world. Chapter 1: Sore Feet and Sacred Corn. A Day in the Aztec Market. The darkness before dawn is absolute as you stir on your woven sleeping mat, your body already aching from yesterday's brutal journey across the stone causeways. The air is cold and damp, carrying the earthy scent of Lake Texcoco that surrounds your floating island city. You are awake not by choice, but by the grinding necessity that governs every moment of your existence. The great market of Tlatelolco waits for no one, and arriving late means the best goods are gone, the most favorable trading spots claimed by others, and another day of desperate struggle stretching endlessly ahead. Your feet find the rough woven sandals beside your sleeping mat, their fiber soles worn thin from countless walks across the unforgiving stone pathways that connect your precarious world. The weight of your carrying basket seems heavier each morning, loaded with the precious corn, beans, and chilies that represent weeks of careful cultivation on your small plot of borrowed land. These simple foods are more than sustenance. They are your currency, your survival, your fragile hope for another day in this magnificent yet merciless empire. The narrow streets of Tenochtitlan are already stirring with movement, as thousands of souls prepare for the same arduous journey. Shadows pass like ghosts in the pre-dawn darkness, each carrying their own burdens toward the massive market complex that serves as the economic heart of the known world. You join this silent procession of the desperate and determined, your bare feet finding purchase on the smooth stone pathways worn by countless generations of traders, farmers, and desperate souls seeking sustenance in a world that offers no guarantees. The great causeway stretches before you like a ribbon of hope and desperation across the dark water, each step taking you further from the relative safety of your small dwelling and closer to the chaos that awaits. With each footfall, the city awakens around you in a symphony of survival. The distant sound of conch shell horns from the great temple mingles with the shuffle of thousands of feet, the creak of overloaded carrying frames, and the whispered prayers of those who know that today, like every day, survival depends on factors far beyond their control. Lake Texcoco laps gently against the stone foundations of your floating city, a constant reminder that this magnificent place exists in defiance of nature itself. The engineering marvel that allows 250,000 people to live on an island in the middle of a lake requires constant maintenance, constant vigilance, and the labor of thousands like yourself, who must contribute their share to keep the impossible dream alive. Every stone of the causeways, every canal, every floating garden represents the accumulated sweat and sacrifice of generations who chose to build paradise in the most unlikely place imaginable. As you walk, imagine the weight of your precious load pressing against your shoulders with each step, the rough hemp straps cutting into your skin as the miles accumulate. The goods you carry represent months of back-breaking work in the chinampas, those floating gardens that produce the food to sustain this vast population. Yet they might fetch only enough to buy a small portion of precious salt, a few cacao beans that serve as currency, or perhaps a piece of obsidian sharp enough to last through the coming season. Everything here is calculated, measured, weighed against the possibility of hunger that lurks always in the shadows. The smell drifts across the water on the morning breeze. A complex mixture that assaults your senses even at this distance. Roasting meat mingles with fresh fish, fermented corn mash, human sweat and something else, something darker that you have learned to associate with the market's sacred corners, where the priests conduct their necessary business of keeping the gods satisfied. The scent grows stronger with each step, building into an olfactory wall that you must penetrate to reach your destination. The first hints of dawn reveal the true scale of your daily challenge, painting the sky in shades that would be beautiful if you had time to notice beauty. Ahead, the market spreads like a vast maze of temporary structures, rising smoke, and seething humanity that defies comprehension. Even from this distance, perhaps half a mile away, the sound reaches you like distant thunder, a low rumble of thousands upon thousands of voices, bargaining, arguing, calling out their wares in a cacophony that Spanish chroniclers would later claim could be heard from 3 miles away. You pause at the edge of the great plaza, overwhelmed, despite your familiarity with this daily ritual. The market of Tlatelolco stretches further than the eye can see, divided into precise sections by invisible but absolute rules that govern commerce in this ordered empire. Archaeological evidence suggests that on major market days, as many as 60,000 people crowded into this space, creating one of the largest commercial gatherings in the ancient world. Here, the feather workers display their brilliant creations that rival the plumage of tropical birds. There, the obsidian knappers chip away at volcanic glass, each strike potentially their last, if they miscalculate and shatter their precious raw material. Beyond them, the food vendors compete for space and attention, their voices rising in promises and prices that fluctuate like the surface of the lake itself. The market operated on a 5-day cycle, with regular daily trading supplemented by special market days when the population swelled dramatically. The organization is both chaotic and perfectly ordered, each type of merchandise confined to its designated area, in a system of commercial districts that would impress modern city planners. The moment you enter this world, you become part of its relentless rhythm that has no mercy for the weak or unprepared. Bodies press against you from every side, as thousands of people navigate spaces designed for hundreds. The air grows thick with the breath of the multitude, the smoke from countless cooking fires, and the dust raised by endless feet trampling the packed earth of the plaza. Your eyes begin to water from the acrid smoke, your throat tightens from the dust and overwhelming scents, and you realize that breathing itself becomes a conscious effort in this crush of desperate humanity. Navigate carefully through the narrow passages between stalls, where merchants crouch behind their carefully arranged goods like guardians, protecting treasure. Each step requires constant attention. The pathways are uneven, slick with spilled liquids, and crowded with hazards that could end your day before it begins. A stumble here could scatter your precious corn across the ground, where it would be lost forever in the chaos of passing feet and grasping hands. The other traders show no mercy. They step around you, over you, through you, if necessary. Compassion is a luxury that few can afford in a place where every transaction might mean the difference between eating and starving. The sensory assault intensifies as you move deeper into the market's labyrinthine heart. The pottery sellers clash their wares together in demonstration, creating a constant percussion that echoes off the low buildings surrounding the plaza, like thunder trapped in a canyon. The textile merchants call out in voices already hoarse from hours of shouting, their colorful fabrics snapping in the morning breeze like captured birds desperate for freedom. The scent of roasting chilies mingles with the metallic tang of blood from the butcher's stalls, creating a combination that is both appetizing and nauseating, a perfect metaphor for life in this empire of contradictions. You pause at a corner where several pathways converge, trying to orient yourself in this labyrinth of desperate commerce. The market officials pass by periodically, their presence marked by the nervous glances of nearby traders who understand the power these men wield. These officials carried the authority of the emperor himself, empowered to seize goods they deemed substandard, to impose fines for perceived infractions, or to ban troublesome sellers from returning. Their passage creates small waves of anxiety that ripple through the crowd like stones thrown into still water, affecting everyone they encounter. The weight of your basket shifts as you adjust your position, reminding you of the precious hours slipping away like water through your fingers. Each moment spent in confusion is a moment lost to competitors who know these pathways like the lines on their weathered palms. You push forward, following the flow of people toward the food section, where your humble goods might find buyers, among the thousands who depend on this market for their daily survival. The competition is fierce, hundreds of farmers like yourself, each hoping their meager harvest will somehow stand out in this ocean of nearly identical offerings. The corn sellers occupy a vast section of the plaza, their golden kernels arranged in perfect pyramids that catch the growing light like small mountains of captured sunshine. Maize was the cornerstone of Aztec diet and culture, so central to their worldview that they described it as precious, our flesh, our bones. The competition among corn sellers is brutal. Supply far exceeds demand on most days, and prices fluctuate based on rumors, weather, and the mysterious calculations of supply and demand that govern this ancient economy with the precision of natural law. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the first wave of potential customers. They are mostly women, carrying their own baskets and accompanied by children who cling to their skirts like small anchors in the sea of moving bodies. Their faces show the same weariness you feel, the same careful calculation of need against scarcity that governs every decision in this precarious existence. They examine your corn with fingers that have learned to detect quality through touch alone, testing each kernel for firmness, color, and size with the expertise of professional assessors. You find a small space between two established vendors, setting down your basket with relief that sends tremors through your aching back and shoulders. The older woman to your left eyes your corn with the practiced gaze of someone who has spent decades in this unforgiving place. Her assessment is swift and brutal. She knows, as you do, that your harvest is merely average, that your bargaining position is weak, and that the day ahead will be long and difficult. Her weathered face shows neither sympathy nor hostility, only the neutral calculation of someone who has learned that sentiment is a luxury that survival cannot afford. Their questions come in rapid succession, each one a test of your honesty and knowledge. Where was this corn grown? When was it harvested? How much for this quantity? Will you accept trade rather than payment? What guarantee can you offer of its quality? The negotiation begins. And with it, the delicate dance of survival that requires you to balance honesty with necessity, fairness with desperation. You know that asking too much will drive them to other vendors, but asking too little will leave you unable to buy the salt, the tools, or the small luxuries that make life bearable. Every transaction becomes a calculation of desperate mathematics, where the difference between success and failure can be measured in single cacao beans. Cacao beans served as currency throughout the empire, making every purchase a careful calculation of value and need. The morning progresses with agonizing slowness as potential customers examine your goods, make offers that barely cover your costs, and move on to competitors whose desperation might make them more flexible. Your feet, already sore from the long walk, begin to throb from standing on the hard stone plaza. The pain shoots up through your legs into your back, reminding you that your body is not designed for this daily punishment. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the heat that will soon make your remaining corn less appealing to potential buyers. Sweat beads on your forehead, mixing with the dust that seems to penetrate everything in this place, creating a gritty paste that stings your eyes and clogs your throat. Your throat grows parched from the dry air and constant talking. But buying water means spending precious resources on something that should be free. Every cacao bean spent on personal comfort is one less bean available for the necessities that keep your family alive. Around you, the market's rhythm builds toward its midday crescendo, when the sun reaches its peak, and the plaza becomes a furnace of human activity. The noise becomes almost unbearable. A constant roar of voices, clattering pottery, bleating animals, and the ever-present sound of chopping, grinding, and cooking. The sounds layer upon each other until individual voices disappear into a wall of human noise that presses against your eardrums, like physical weight. The smells intensify as well, creating a thick atmosphere that seems to press against your skin. The pleasant aroma of fresh tortillas battles with the sharp scent of fermented beverages, and the unavoidable odor of human waste that accumulates wherever thousands gather without adequate sanitation. You watch with growing anxiety as more successful traders conduct their business, with an efficiency born of years of practice and better connections. They know their customers personally, understand the subtle signals of the market, and move through transactions with a speed that seems almost magical to your inexperienced eyes. Their goods disappear steadily while yours remain largely untouched, a silent testament to your inexperience and the brutal meritocracy of this ancient economy, where success goes to those who best understand its unforgiving rules. The afternoon brings new challenges, as the initial crowd of eager buyers thins, replaced by more cautious customers who know that desperate sellers will lower their prices as the day wears on. You find yourself caught in this cruel arithmetic, and hold your prices and risk selling nothing, or lower them and guarantee that tomorrow will be even harder, as word spreads of your willingness to accept less. The choice is yours, but neither option offers real comfort or long-term security. Most Aztec commoners ate only 2 meals per day, one in the mid-morning after several hours of work, and another in the early afternoon during the hottest part of the day. As the sun begins its descent toward the western mountains, you realize that the day has not gone as hoped. Your basket still contains more corn than you have sold, and the long journey home awaits with its own set of challenges and disappointments. The other vendors begin to pack their remaining goods, their faces showing the same mixture of exhaustion and resignation that you feel settling into your bones like a permanent weight. Some have done well, their baskets nearly empty and their pouches heavy with payment that will sustain their families through another day. Others, like yourself, face the prospect of carrying their burden home, their labor unrewarded, and their families no closer to security than they were this morning. The market officials make their final rounds, collecting taxes and tribute from the day's transactions, with the efficiency of those who have perfected the art of extraction. Their presence reminds you that even in this place of apparent commercial freedom, the emperor's hand reaches into every exchange, claiming his portion of whatever modest success you might have achieved. The tribute collectors are thorough and precise, their calculations exact and their expectations absolute. There is no negotiating with them, no appeal to mercy or hardship. The journey home begins as the market slowly empties around you, the great plaza transforming from a place of hope and desperation back into empty stone. The causeways that seemed so alive with possibility this morning now stretch before you like a test of endurance that you must pass to earn another chance at failure tomorrow. Your feet, already battered by the day's standing, must carry you back across the lake to your small plot of borrowed land, where tomorrow's challenges already wait like patient predators. As you prepare to leave, lifting your still heavy basket onto your aching shoulders, you catch a glimpse of the market's darker face. In the shadows between stalls, in the corners where the respectable merchants do not venture, you see the truly desperate, those who have nothing left to sell but their labor, their bodies, or their remaining years of life. They huddle together like wounded animals, offering themselves as porters, servants, or worse, their eyes holding the hollow desperation of those who have discovered that even survival can be too expensive in this magnificent but merciless world. The weight of your unsold goods feels heavier somehow, as if failure itself has mass and weight that grows with each step. The setting sun paints the water in shades of gold and crimson, creating a beauty that seems almost mocking in its splendor. Around you, other traders make their own defeated journeys home, their silence speaking volumes about the harsh realities of life in this magnificent but unforgiving empire, where beauty and brutality exist side by side. The great pyramids of Tenochtitlan rise ahead like mountains built by human will, their steps leading up to realms of power and privilege that seem impossibly distant from your daily struggle. The priests who climb those steps never worry about selling corn, never calculate the cost of salt against the price of survival, never face the simple arithmetic of whether today's labor will buy tomorrow's food. They live in a different world, one where cosmic concerns override earthly needs, where the movement of stars matters more than the movement of goods in the marketplace below. Chapter 2: Montezuma's Fall, the Emperor Who Watched the Gods Leap. As the sounds of the marketplace fade into the peaceful rhythm of evening, we turn our attention to a figure who never walked among those common traders, yet whose fate was inextricably linked to theirs. High above the plaza, in chambers decorated with feathers more precious than gold, lived a man whose burden was perhaps greater than any market vendor's, for he carried the weight of an entire world on his shoulders. His name would echo through history as one of the great tragic figures of human leadership, a ruler caught between worlds that could never coexist. Picture the young Moctezuma ascending to the throne in 1502, inheriting an empire that stretched from coast to coast, and encompassed between 6 and 12 million people living in over 500 cities. The great temple of Tenochtitlan rose like a mountain at the city's heart, its steps washed daily with offerings that ensured the sun would rise and the rains would come. He was not merely a king, he was the living embodiment of divine will, the bridge between the world of mortals and the realm of the gods, bearing the title Huitzilopochtli, meaning great speaker or he who speaks. Moctezuma Xochitlán, the second of his name, had not always been an emperor paralyzed by impossible choices. In his youth, he had been a warrior of exceptional skill, a priest of deep devotion, and a ruler of decisive action. Born around 1466 into the royal lineage of the most powerful empire in Mesoamerica, he was groomed from childhood to inherit dominion over millions of souls. But the gods, it seemed, had written a different story for his final years, plans that would transform him from a figure of absolute power into a tragic symbol of a world's end. Archaeological evidence reveals that during Moctezuma's reign, the Aztec Empire reached its greatest geographical extent. In those early years, Moctezuma ruled with the confidence of a man who believed the universe itself supported his authority. He expanded the empire's borders through approximately 73 military campaigns, achieving victory in about 43 sites, making him one of the most militarily active monarchs in pre-Hispanic Mexican history. He refined the empire's tribute systems that brought wealth flowing toward Tenochtitlan, like rivers converging on a lake, and elevated the capital to heights of splendor that would amaze Spanish conquistadors when they first beheld it. The emperor's daily life reflected the magnificent complexity of his civilization. Moctezuma was known for his meticulous attention to personal hygiene, reportedly bathing multiple times daily and never wearing the same garments twice. His meals featured delicacies that common people would never taste, including chocolate prepared with exotic spices, a beverage so precious that cacao beans served as currency throughout the empire. He maintained private hunting forests for his exclusive use, where he could practice the arts of war and chase that had trained him for leadership. But empires, like the human hearts that guide them, are fragile constructs, built on foundations that can shift without warning. As Moctezuma's reign progressed, cracks began to appear in the perfect order he had inherited and expanded. The tributary provinces grew restless under the weight of ever-increasing tribute demands. The empire's very success created problems that success could not solve. Each conquered territory required administration. Each new tributary demanded military oversight, and each expansion stretched the lines of communication and control further toward their breaking point. The tribute system that had made the empire possible was beginning to consume itself like a fire that burns too hot. Each year brought heavier demands, stronger resistance, and more desperate measures to maintain the flow of goods and people that sustained the capital. The Flower Wars, those ritualized conflicts designed to capture prisoners for sacrifice rather than to conquer territory, became more frequent and more deadly as the empire's appetite for offerings grew. Moctezuma found himself managing not an empire at peace, but a collection of barely contained rebellions held together by fear, force, and the diminishing prestige of Aztec military superiority. The priests brought him increasingly disturbing reports that spoke not just of earthly troubles, but of cosmic disturbance. Strange phenomena appeared in the night sky. Comets burned with unusual brightness, and the calendar priests interpreted these signs as warnings of unprecedented change. The old prophecies, passed down through generations of religious scholars, spoke of a time when the god Quetzalcoatl would return from the east to reclaim the world from his temporary stewards. This return was prophesied to occur in the year 1 Reed, which corresponded to 1519 in the foreign calendar, a date that approached with ominous significance. In the privacy of his chambers, surrounded by advisors who dared not speak honestly about the empire's growing problems, Moctezuma grappled with questions that had no satisfactory answers. How could he reduce the tribute demands without starving his own people? How could he maintain the religious ceremonies that kept the world in balance without provoking further rebellion among the tribute bearers? How could he rule an empire that seemed to be pulling itself apart through its own contradictions and excessive demands? The emperor's spies brought back artifacts that deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. Spanish helmets resembled those worn by the god Quetzalcoatl in ancient depictions, their steel construction and unfamiliar design suggesting origins beyond the mortal world. Glass beads captured light in ways that seemed magical to people who had never seen such materials, and iron tools possessed a hardness that obsidian could not match. Most troubling were the accounts of horses, animals unknown in the New World, which appeared to merge rider and mount into single mythical beings of unprecedented power. Then came the reports from the eastern coast that would shatter Moctezuma's world forever. In 1517, Spanish ships had been sighted off the shores of his empire. Great floating structures carrying beings unlike any the coastal peoples had ever seen. The descriptions defied comprehension: pale-skinned men with hair covering their faces, creatures who rode on the backs of four-legged beasts larger than deer, warriors who wore silver skin that could not be pierced by obsidian weapons, and most disturbing of all, men who carried sticks that spoke with the voice of thunder and could kill at great distances. Moctezuma faced a choice that would have tested any ruler in human history. These strangers could be gods, in which case resistance would be not merely futile, but blasphemous, a violation of cosmic order that could bring divine retribution upon the entire empire. They could be men, in which case they represented a threat, unlike any the empire had faced, possessing technologies and knowledge that rendered traditional military responses potentially useless. Or they could be something else entirely, the demons sent to test his faith, spirits of the dead returning to reclaim their ancient lands, or harbingers of the world's end, prophesied in the sacred texts. The decision Moctezuma made would echo through history as one of the great tragic choices of leadership. Rather than meet these strangers with overwhelming force while they were few and far from reinforcement, he chose the path of diplomatic engagement and religious uncertainty. He prepared gifts of unprecedented richness, gold worked into intricate forms that demonstrated the highest achievements of Aztec craftsmanship, feathers arranged in patterns of breathtaking beauty, and precious stones that captured the essence of earthly perfection. If these visitors were gods, such offerings would honor them appropriately. If they were men, such wealth might satisfy their desires and encourage them to depart peacefully. But the gifts had consequences that Moctezuma could never have anticipated. The Spanish conquistadors, led by Hernán Cortés, saw in these treasures not gestures of divine respect, but advertisements for unimaginable wealth waiting to be claimed. The emperor's attempt to honor potential gods became a roadmap for conquest, a detailed catalogue of the riches that lay within his empire's borders. Every golden ornament, every perfect feather, every precious stone proclaimed the sophistication and wealth of a civilization ready for plunder. The meeting between Moctezuma and Cortés, when it finally occurred on November 8, 1519, was a collision of worldviews so different that meaningful communication became almost impossible. The emperor, dressed in the full regalia of divine kingship, met the conquistador as he might receive a visiting deity or the ambassador of cosmic forces beyond human understanding. Spanish chroniclers described the scene with wonder and incomprehension. Thousands of Aztec nobles in costumes of incredible richness, a floating city more magnificent than any European capital, and a ruler whose palace exceeded in luxury anything the conquistadors had imagined possible. Cortés, seeing only a wealthy native ruler ripe for exploitation, accepted the honors while planning treachery that would have been unthinkable between Christian princes. The cultural gap between the two leaders was so vast that each interpreted the other's actions through frameworks that made true understanding impossible. Where Moctezuma saw cosmic uncertainty requiring careful religious navigation, Cortés saw political weakness to be exploited. Where Cortés saw primitive superstition to be manipulated, Moctezuma saw potential divine will that must be respected regardless of personal cost. For months the Spanish lived as guests in the heart of Tenochtitlan, occupying chambers in the imperial palace while studying the city's defenses and cataloguing its treasures. They marveled at the engineering achievements that allowed 250,000 people to live on an island in the middle of a lake, at the floating gardens that fed this vast population, and at the architectural sophistication that created one of the world's largest cities without beasts of burden or wheeled vehicles. Yet their wonder was colored by greed and the practical assessment of how such wealth might be seized and transported. Moctezuma, trapped by his own hospitality and the cosmic uncertainty of his visitor's nature, found himself in the impossible position of hosting his own potential destroyers. He knew that his people grew restless with each passing day, that his nobles whispered of weakness and collaboration, that his priests questioned his judgment in allowing armed strangers to occupy the sacred precincts of the imperial palace. But the possibility that these men were divine messengers, or harbingers of cosmic change foretold in prophecy, paralyzed decisive action that might have preserved his empire. When Cortés returned to find the city in open rebellion, he made a decision that would define the remainder of Moctezuma's tragic story. The emperor, he declared, would serve as a puppet ruler, issuing commands that originated from Spanish calculations but carried the weight of imperial authority. Moctezuma, now a prisoner in his own palace, surrounded by men who had shown their true nature through unprovoked massacre, faced the final degradation of his reign and the complete inversion of his life's meaning. The breaking point came when Cortés left the city temporarily, leaving his lieutenant Pedro de Alvarado in command during his absence. During a religious festival dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and patron deity of Tenochtitlan, Alvarado ordered his men to attack the unarmed dancers participating in the sacred ceremony. The massacre that followed turned the temple plaza into a charnel house, with the blood of nobles and priests flowing across stones that had been consecrated to very different kinds of sacrifice. In that moment, any pretense of divine visitation dissolved forever. The Spanish had revealed themselves as mortal men, brutal, greedy, and ruthless mortal men who respected neither gods nor the sacred obligations of hospitality. The emperor's attempts to calm his rebellious people, to explain the inexplicable, to maintain some semblance of order in a world gone mad, fell on ears deafened by rage and betrayal. His subjects no longer saw him as the living embodiment of a divine will, but as a collaborator who had betrayed his sacred trust. The Spanish saw him as a useful tool, valuable only as long as he could maintain their fiction of legitimate authority in a city that now recognized no legitimacy except the law of force. Caught between these irreconcilable positions, Moctezuma became a prisoner of circumstances that had spiraled beyond any human control. The siege of Tenochtitlan that followed would demonstrate both the incredible resilience of Aztec civilization and the impossibility of resistance against the combination of European technology, indigenous allies, and the devastating impact of diseases to which the native population had no immunity. The city that had seemed impregnable, protected by lake waters and supplied by an empire's tribute, became a trap for its defenders as Spanish allies cut the causeways and controlled the surrounding territories. Moctezuma's final public appearance epitomized the tragic irony of his position. Dressed in the imperial regalia that had once commanded absolute reverence, he appeared before his people to ask for their surrender, to convince them that continued resistance would only bring greater suffering. The response was as swift as it was symbolic. Stones flew from the crowd, thrown by hands that had once reached toward him in worship and supplication, whether thrown in anger at his perceived betrayal or in desperate attempt to free him from Spanish control. The stones that struck the emperor down were hurled by his own people, the final cruel twist in a story that had already exceeded the boundaries of individual tragedy. The historical sources disagree about the precise manner of Moctezuma's death, reflecting the chaos and confusion of those final days. Spanish chroniclers claimed he died from wounds inflicted by his own people, a narrative that conveniently absolved the conquistadors of responsibility for his demise. Aztec accounts suggested he was murdered by the Spanish as they prepared to flee the city, his body thrown from the palace in a final gesture of contempt. The truth, lost in the fog of war, and the distortions of competing propaganda, matters less than the symbolic meaning of his end. Moctezuma died as he had lived his final years, caught between worlds that could not coexist, forced to make choices that had no good outcomes, and bearing responsibility for catastrophes that exceeded any individual's power to prevent or control. His death marked more than the end of a single life. It symbolized the death of an entire civilization's way of understanding the world. The emperor who had once been the bridge between earth and heaven, between mortal concerns and cosmic order, died as that bridge collapsed beneath the weight of historical forces too vast for any human architecture to support. With Moctezuma's death, the last hope of preserving the old order through accommodation and compromise died as well. His brother Cuitlahuac, who succeeded him briefly, died within months of smallpox, one of the European diseases that would ultimately kill more Aztecs than Spanish weapons ever could. His nephew Cuauhtémoc, the final emperor, could offer only desperate resistance against forces that had already proven unstoppable. The Spanish conquest that followed would indeed transform everything. The religion, the language, the political structure, and the very categories through which people understood their relationship to the world around them. But perhaps Moctezuma's greatest tragedy was not personal, but cosmic in scope. He represented the end of a way of being human that had developed over centuries of sophisticated civilization. The integration of political authority with religious responsibility, the understanding of individual destiny as inseparable from cosmic order, the belief that human actions could influence the fundamental structures of reality, all of this died with him, replaced by European concepts of power, spirituality, and knowledge that were equally sophisticated but utterly different in their basic assumptions about the nature of existence. In destroying the old world, the Spanish conquest also destroyed forms of wisdom that had taken generations to develop, the astronomical knowledge that enabled precise calendar calculations, the agricultural techniques that supported dense urban populations in challenging environments, the artistic traditions that created beauty of unprecedented complexity. Though all of this was lost or transformed beyond recognition, representing not just political conquest but intellectual and spiritual catastrophe on a scale that history rarely witnesses. As we drift away from this tale of imperial tragedy, we carry with us the image of a man who held what appeared to be absolute power, yet found himself absolutely powerless when confronted with forces beyond his comprehension or control. Moctezuma's story reminds us that leadership, no matter how divinely sanctioned or culturally sophisticated, cannot always protect us from the storms of historical change that sweep away entire civilizations without regard for their achievements or the nobility of their intentions. The emperor who watched the gods leave teaches us about the fragility of all human institutions, no matter how permanent they seem to those who live within them. His palace lies in ruins now, buried beneath the Mexico City that rose from the wreckage of his empire. His empire exists only in the fragments that archaeologists recover, and the accounts that historians struggle to interpret across the gap of centuries and cultures. But his struggle, the eternal human struggle, to make sense of chaos, to find meaning in loss, to rule justly in an unjust world, continues in each of us, who face our own impossible choices with whatever wisdom and courage we can muster. The lesson of Moctezuma is not that resistance is futile or that accommodation is cowardly, but that sometimes historical forces exceed individual agency so completely that personal virtue becomes irrelevant to outcomes. His failure was not moral, but situational. The collision of civilizations so different that peaceful coexistence was impossible regardless of the goodwill or wisdom of individual leaders on either side. In recognizing this, we honor both his memory and the complexity of the historical forces that shaped his tragic end. Sleep well, knowing that the choices you face, however difficult, exist within a world where communication is possible, where different cultures can meet without one necessarily destroying the other, and where individual agency retains some meaningful relationship to outcomes. But remember too that Moctezuma's story continues in each encounter between different ways of understanding the world, each moment when we must choose between accommodation and resistance, and each situation where our deepest beliefs about reality itself are challenged by circumstances beyond our control. Chapter 3. The Sacred Calendar. How the Aztecs mapped time and death. From the personal tragedy of a fallen emperor, we turn now to something far more mysterious and enduring, the intricate machinery of time itself, as the Aztecs understood it. While Moctezuma grappled with immediate political crises that would destroy his empire, his priests were engaged in calculations that stretched across millennia, mapping not just days and years, but the very structure of reality. In their sophisticated worldview, time was not a river flowing steadily forward towards some distant destination, but a complex web of interlocking cycles, each carrying its own dangers, opportunities, and cosmic significance. The great calendar stone that archaeologists discovered, buried beneath Mexico City on December 1790, speaks to us across the centuries with symbols carved in basalt harder than steel. This massive disc, weighing more than 24 tons and measuring 3.6 meters in diameter, represents one of humanity's most sophisticated attempts to understand the relationship between time, fate, and the fundamental forces that govern existence. But it was far more than an intellectual exercise or artistic achievement. It was a survival manual for a civilization that believed time itself possessed the power to create and destroy worlds. Imagine yourself as a calendar priest in the great temple complex of Tenochtitlan. your chambers overlooking the city from a height that makes the bustling crowds below seem like ants pursuing their endless tasks. Yet, your concerns reach far beyond earthly affairs, into realms where human understanding meets cosmic mystery. You are responsible for something far more important than commerce, conquest, or even the daily administration of empire. You must keep track of time itself, ensuring that the intricate ceremonies maintaining the world's balance occur at precisely the right moments in the vast clockwork of creation. Your training began in childhood, when other children played in the streets far below your elevated chambers, while they learned to plant corn, weave cloth, or fashion obsidian tools. You memorized the complex relationships between the 20-day signs and the 13 numbers that created the sacred calendar's 260-day cycle. This calendar, called the tonal pohuali, or counting of the days, formed the spiritual heartbeat of Aztec civilization, each day carrying specific meanings that could bring fortune or catastrophe, depending on how carefully humans aligned their actions with cosmic rhythms. Each combination of number and day sign carried profound significance that influenced every aspect of life and death. The day one rabbit might be perfect for beginning a love affair or starting a new business venture, while 7 death would bring catastrophe to any important undertaking, and was reserved for the most solemn rituals. Your mind became a living repository of these intricate associations, a human computer calculating the intersection of multiple time streams that governed everything from individual destiny to imperial policy. The sacred calendar represented only one dimension of your cosmic responsibility. Simultaneously, you tracked the solar year of 3065 days, watching as the seasons turned through their eternal dance of planting, growing, harvesting, and rest. This solar calendar, called the Shiupuhuali, or year count, consisted of 18 months of 20 days each, plus 5 additional days called Nemontemi, the nameless days that belonged to neither the old year nor the new, and were considered extremely dangerous. Here lay one of the great mathematical achievements that modern scholars still struggle to fully comprehend. How did your people manage to keep these two vastly different cycles synchronized with such precision that their calculations remained accurate across centuries? The tonal pohuali of 260 days and the Shiupuhuali of 3065 days would align completely only once every 52 years, creating what your civilization called the calendar round, a period so significant that its completion was marked by elaborate ceremonies and the ritualistic binding of years. The mathematics involved were staggering in their complexity and precision. Within the larger 52-year cycle, smaller patterns emerged and dissolved like ripples spreading across the surface of Lake Texcoco. Every single day belonged simultaneously to both calendars, creating a unique combination of influences that would not repeat for decades. Your job required tracking not just these major cycles, but dozens of smaller ones, the phases of Venus, the movements of other celestial bodies, and the subtle rhythms that governed everything from agriculture to warfare to the timing of religious festivals. As you performed your calculations in the quiet hours before dawn, surrounded by bark paper books covered in symbols that would have seemed like pure magic to the market vendors struggling for survival below, you participated in an intellectual tradition stretching back over 1,000 years. The knowledge you guarded had been accumulated slowly and painfully through generations of careful observation and mathematical refinement. Your predecessors had tracked celestial movements with instruments of surprising precision, calculated the length of the solar year to within minutes of modern measurements, and predicted eclipses with accuracy that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests that the tonal pohuali may have been based on actual astronomical observations, particularly the fact that the sun crosses a zenith point over Corpan, the classic Maya city, precisely every 260 days. This connection between mathematical abstraction and physical reality demonstrates the sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics that underlay Aztec timekeeping. The 260-day period also corresponds closely to the human gestation period and the interval between Venus appearances, suggesting multiple layers of meaning embedded in this fundamental cycle. But this was never merely academic exercise or intellectual curiosity. In your world, time carried profound moral weight and cosmic significance. The day on which a child was born would determine their character, their profession, their likelihood of success in life, and even their eventual manner of death. Warriors preferred to begin battles on days ruled by aggressive deities like Tezcatlipoca, while merchants waited for signs governed by gods of wealth and travel like Yakatecutli. Even the emperor himself consulted your calculations before making important decisions, understanding that acting at the wrong time could bring disaster, not just to himself, but to the entire empire and all its millions of subjects. The psychological burden of this responsibility was immense and constant. When eclipses came, when comets appeared in the night sky, when unusual celestial events disrupted the normal order of things, people looked to you for explanation, interpretation, and reassurance. You had to maintain the confidence of a society that literally depended on your ability to predict and interpret the cosmos with perfect accuracy. A miscalculation could lead to ceremonies performed at inappropriate times, offerings made to wrong deities, or crucial decisions made under unfavorable astrological conditions that might doom entire military campaigns or agricultural seasons. Perhaps most haunting of all was your knowledge of the larger cycles that governed not just individual lives or single generations, but entire civilizations and cosmic ages. The creation myth spoke clearly of 4 previous worlds that had been destroyed when their allotted time expired, each swept away by catastrophic forces when the gods grew tired of their imperfection, or when cosmic time itself demanded renewal. You lived and worked in the 5th sun, the 5th world, knowing with absolute certainty that it too would eventually end when its designated time was complete. This cosmic pessimism shaped everything about Aztec civilization and daily life. The magnificent temples that rose like artificial mountains throughout the empire, the elaborate ceremonies that consumed vast resources and countless hours of preparation, the constant offerings that included everything from precious goods to human lives. All were desperate attempts to postpone the inevitable end, to convince the gods to maintain the current world for just a little longer. You calculated not just when to plant crops or begin wars, but when to perform the great ceremonies that kept the sun moving across the sky, ensured the rains would come, and prevented the world itself from dissolving back into the primordial chaos from which it had originally emerged. The calendar stone itself served as a masterpiece of theological and mathematical engineering, encoding layer upon layer of temporal meaning in its intricate carvings. At its center lay the face of Tenochtitlan, the sun god, surrounded by symbols representing the 4 previous worlds that had been destroyed when their time ended. Some modern scholars suggest this central face might represent the death of the sun god during an eclipse, an event that Aztecs believed could trigger the global apocalypse they constantly feared. The 20-day signs ringed this central image, each carved with precision that testified to the mathematical sophistication of its creators. The stone was more than decoration or even religious symbol. It functioned as a massive calculating device that helped priests track the complex intersections of multiple time cycles. Modern archaeologists studying this monument have uncovered evidence of astronomical knowledge that seems almost impossible for a civilization without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or what Europeans would recognize as scientific instruments. The Aztecs tracked not just the obvious cycles of sun and moon, but the far more subtle movements of Venus, which they associated with the god Quetzalcoatl and his promised return. They knew that Venus would appear as both morning and evening star in a cycle lasting 84 days, and they had calculated this cycle's relationship to both their sacred and solar calendars with remarkable mathematical precision. Venus was particularly important because its movements were believed to influence warfare, with certain phases being considered auspicious for military campaigns, while others demanded peaceful activities. The planet's 8-year cycle, during which it returns to the same position relative to Earth and the Sun, was integrated into long-term ceremonial planning and political decision-making. But perhaps the most mysterious and psychologically significant aspect of Aztec timekeeping was their understanding of the Neman, the 5 unlucky days that fell at the end of each solar year. These days belonged to neither the old year nor the new, creating a temporal void where normal rules and protections didn't apply. During these 5 days, people avoided important activities, children stayed close to home under careful watch, pregnant women took special precautions, and the priests performed elaborate ceremonies designed to safely bridge the dangerous gap between years. The psychological effect of these periods must have been profound. 5 days each year when time itself became dangerous, when the normal order broke down and chaos threatened to reclaim the world. People extinguished their fires, fasted, and engaged in ritual bloodletting to ensure their survival through this perilous transition. The emperor himself participated in these observances, demonstrating that even absolute political power offered no protection against the cosmic forces that governed temporal existence. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Aztecs' temporal obsessions had practical consequences, extending far beyond religious ceremony and personal anxiety. Their agricultural techniques were timed according to calendar calculations that took into account not just seasonal changes, but astrological factors, lunar phases, and the positions of various planets. Farmers consulted the Tenochtitlan bark paper books that contain detailed calendrical information to determine the most auspicious times for planting, cultivating, and harvesting different crops. Military campaigns were planned around favorable day signs and planetary alignments that would give Aztec forces cosmic support in battle. Market days were scheduled according to complex rotations that ensured equal access to trading opportunities, while respecting the religious significance of different temporal periods. Even construction projects, from humble homes to massive temple complexes, were begun only on days deemed favorable by calendar priests who understood the cosmic implications of different temporal moments. The precision of these calculations becomes even more remarkable when we consider the tools available to Aztec astronomers and mathematicians. Without telescopes, mechanical clocks, or metal instruments, they achieved accuracy that rivals modern methods through patient observation, careful record-keeping, and mathematical techniques of extraordinary sophistication. They used shadow-casting devices, carefully aligned buildings, and multi-generational observations to track celestial movements with precision that astonishes contemporary scholars. Buildings throughout the Aztec Empire were oriented according to astronomical considerations that allowed them to function as precision instruments for tracking the movements of sun, moon, planets, and stars. The Great Temple of Tenochtitlan was aligned so that sunrise on certain significant days would illuminate specific chambers and altars, creating dramatic effects that reinforced the connection between earthly ceremonies and cosmic events. Similar astronomical alignments can be found in structures throughout Mesoamerica, suggesting a widespread tradition of architectural astronomy that served both practical and spiritual purposes. Yet, for all their mathematical sophistication and observational accuracy, the Aztec calendar system was fundamentally different from our modern understanding of time's nature and purpose. Where we see time as linear progression from past through present toward future, they understood it as cyclical repetition in which the same energies and influences returned again and again in predictable patterns. This cyclical worldview meant that history could literally repeat itself, that the same combinations of celestial influences would create similar events, and that careful study of the past could reveal the likely shape of future developments. This temporal philosophy had profound implications for how people lived their daily lives and understood their place in the larger cosmic order. If time was cyclical rather than linear, then patience became a virtue of cosmic significance rather than mere personal discipline. A person born under unfavorable signs might have to wait years or even decades for their luck to change, but change it would, as surely as the seasons turned and the planets moved through their appointed courses. Conversely, those enjoying good fortune knew it was temporary, that the wheel of time would eventually bring different influences into prominence. The Spanish conquest brought an abrupt and devastating end to this sophisticated system of timekeeping and cosmic understanding. The Christian calendar, with its linear progression toward Judgment Day and its rejection of cyclical renewal, replaced the complex interlocking cycles that had governed Mesoamerican life for over a millennium. The calendar priests were scattered, killed, or forced to abandon their traditional knowledge, their libraries of bark paper books burned as demonic superstition, their carefully maintained astronomical observations dismissed as primitive paganism. Within a single generation, one of humanity's most sophisticated attempts to understand the relationship between time, destiny, and cosmic order had been reduced to archaeological fragments and half-remembered myths. The mathematical techniques that had enabled precise eclipse predictions, the astronomical observations that had tracked planetary cycles across centuries, the calendrical calculations that had coordinated the activities of millions of people, all of this accumulated wisdom vanished almost overnight, replaced by European systems that were equally sophisticated in their own way, but operated according to completely different assumptions about the nature of time and its relationship to human existence. But traces of this temporal wisdom survive today, encoded in stone monuments too massive to destroy easily, and preserved in the memories of indigenous communities that maintained fragments of ancient knowledge, despite centuries of suppression and persecution. Modern astronomers and mathematicians studying Aztec calendar systems have discovered computational methods and observational techniques that remained unknown to European science until the development of advanced mathematical approaches in recent centuries. The precision of their eclipse predictions, the accuracy of their planetary cycle calculations, and the sophistication of their calendrical mathematics suggest intellectual achievements that we are only beginning to appreciate fully. Contemporary scholars working to decode surviving codices and interpret archaeological evidence continue to uncover new layers of meaning in Aztec temporal systems, revealing levels of complexity that challenge assumptions about pre-industrial mathematical capabilities. As we drift away from these cosmic calculations, carried by the rhythm of our own, more predictable and mechanically measured time, we might reflect on what humanity lost when this system disappeared forever. The Aztec calendar offered something our modern timekeeping fundamentally lacked, a sense that time itself has meaning beyond mere measurement, that the moments of our lives participate in vast cycles of cosmic significance that connect individual destiny to universal purpose. Whether we believe in the specific predictions and interpretations of their system, there remains something profound in their conviction that time and human destiny are intimately connected through mathematical relationships of extraordinary complexity. Their approach to temporal existence offered both terror and comfort. That terror in the knowledge that cosmic forces beyond human control ultimately determined individual and collective fate, but comfort in the certainty that these forces operated according to discoverable patterns that careful study could reveal and predict. The calendar priests who once climbed the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan to observe the stars and calculate the future are gone now, their knowledge as extinct as the world they tried desperately to preserve through mathematical precision and religious ceremony. But their legacy remains in the questions they asked about the nature of time, the incredible precision with which they sought answers, and the profound seriousness with which they approached their cosmic responsibilities. In our age of atomic clocks, satellite navigation, and digital precision, we might wonder whether we have gained accuracy at the cost of meaning, whether our superior technology has come with a corresponding loss of wonder at the mysterious relationship between time, destiny, and the turning of the celestial sphere. The Aztec understanding of time as a living force that shapes reality reminds us that measurement and meaning need not be separate, that precision and poetry can coexist in approaches to temporal existence that honor both mathematical truth and spiritual significance. Chapter 4: Feathers, Gold and Rituals. Life among the Aztec nobility. From the cosmic calculations that govern the flow of time itself, we descend now into the rarefied world of those who lived as if they could command time's very passage. While the calendar priests tracked celestial cycles and market vendors struggled for daily survival, the Aztec nobility inhabited a realm of almost unimaginable luxury. Yet this golden existence came with its own unique forms of suffering, its own inescapable prisons built from privilege, expectation, and the constant weight of cosmic responsibility. Picture yourself awakening not on a rough woven mat in a humble adobe dwelling, but on a bed carved from precious cedar and draped with cotton so fine it feels like captured clouds against your skin. The walls surrounding you are not simple mud brick, but polished stone decorated with murals that tell the stories of gods and heroes, their pigments still vibrant in the gentle morning light. Featherwork hangings filter the dawn through their iridescent blues and greens, shifting like captured water as the sun moves across the sky above your palace chambers. This is the world of the Pipiltin, the noble class whose very existence serves as testament to the empire's wealth and the favor of the gods. Archaeological evidence suggests that these elite families controlled vast estates worked by thousands of tenant farmers and servants, their wealth flowing from tribute systems that stretched across hundreds of miles. Yet even as you enjoy these material comforts that surpass anything the common people could imagine, you remain bound by rules so complex and absolute that every moment of your day must be choreographed according to protocols developed over centuries of imperial tradition. Your first conscious act each morning is not the natural stretching or yawning that comes with waking, but the careful arrangement of your expression into one appropriate to your exalted station. Nobles do not show surprise, do not display sudden emotion, do not reveal the inner workings of their minds to those around them. Even in the privacy of your chambers, even in the vulnerable moments between sleep and consciousness, you must remember who you are and what that sacred identity demands of every gesture and thought. The process of dressing alone requires the assistance of multiple servants, each trained in the precise protocols that govern noble appearance and behavior. Every piece of clothing carries profound meaning. Every color combination sends carefully coded messages about your rank, your family connections, your current standing with the emperor and the gods. The feathers in your elaborate headdress are not merely decorative, but they represent a complex vocabulary of status and achievement that everyone in the palace hierarchy can read as easily as the market vendors interpret the quality of corn. Your costume for today includes elements that would represent multiple lifetimes of wealth for those struggling souls we encountered earlier in the great marketplace. The jade ornaments adorning your throat were carved by master craftsmen whose skills were passed down through generations of specialized knowledge, each piece representing months of careful work. The gold bands circling your arms were hammered from precious metal that traveled hundreds of miles along trade routes controlled by imperial decree, their very presence proclaiming your connection to cosmic forces that govern wealth and power. But perhaps most precious of all are the feathers woven into your garments, particularly the brilliant green plumes of the quetzal bird that could only be obtained from distant tropical forests. Each feather represents a small fortune in trade goods, and the specialized knowledge of hunters who risked their lives to obtain them from birds so sacred that killing them was forbidden to all but the most elite collectors. The Amanteca, the feather workers who created these magnificent garments, formed a privileged class of craftsmen who lived in their own neighborhood and honored their own gods. Yet even they served the nobility who commissioned their most spectacular creations. Yet these magnificent garments that mark your elevated status also function as elaborate prisons. The wrong feather worn at the wrong ceremony, an improper color combination displayed before the wrong audience, even a slightly inappropriate gesture while wearing these sacred ornaments could be interpreted as insult to imperial authority, violation of cosmic protocol, or challenge to the divine order that maintains the world's stability. The very luxury that proclaims your status also marks you as a target for observation, judgment, and potential elimination by those whose own positions depend on maintaining the delicate balance of palace politics. Sumptuary laws governed every aspect of noble dress with religious precision. Cotton clothing was reserved exclusively for the upper classes, with commoners facing death for wearing fabrics meant only for their betters. Gold, turquoise, jade, and the finest feathers could be worn only by those whose bloodlines and achievements earned them this cosmic privilege. These restrictions were not mere social convention but sacred law, enforced with the understanding that maintaining proper hierarchy was essential to preventing universal chaos. Your daily schedule unfolds according to rhythms as rigid and precise as those governing the sacred calendar itself. The morning hours are devoted to administrative duties that would challenge even modern bureaucrats, reviewing tribute reports from distant provinces, settling disputes between lesser nobles whose conflicts could affect the empire's stability, coordinating the complex logistics that keep millions of people fed, clothed, and organized across hundreds of city-states. These tasks require not just intelligence, but encyclopedic knowledge of imperial law, family genealogies spanning generations, trade relationships connecting distant regions, and the subtle protocols governing interaction between different ranks of nobility. The intellectual demands of noble life were staggering in their scope and complexity. You were expected to compose poetry of sophisticated literary merit that would be remembered and recited for generations, to understand the philosophical implications of religious doctrine that connected earthly politics to cosmic order, to speak eloquently on subjects ranging from astronomy to agriculture, with authority that commanded respect from specialists in each field. Your education, which began in the exclusive Karmakek schools and continued throughout your life, encompassed not just practical skills, but the accumulated wisdom of a civilization that valued learning as much as military prowess. Children of the nobility attended these elite institutions, where they learned rhetoric, music, poetry, law, astronomy, mathematics, history, architecture, agriculture, and warfare from masters who represented the pinnacle of Aztec intellectual achievement. The contrast with commoner education was stark. While common children learned basic skills in Telpo-Kali schools, noble children mastered complex philosophical concepts and sophisticated artistic techniques that would prepare them for lives of leadership and cosmic responsibility. But perhaps the greatest burden of your elevated position was the unrelenting weight of ritual responsibility. As a member of the noble class, You were not merely a beneficiary of the empire's wealth and a participant in its political structure. You were a crucial component in the ceremonial machinery that maintained cosmic order and prevented universal destruction. Your presence at temple festivals was not optional attendance, but essential contribution to the spiritual technology that kept the sun moving across the sky and the rains falling in their proper seasons. Religious obligations consumed vast portions of noble time and resources. You were expected to sponsor elaborate festivals that could cost more than entire villages produced in a year, to provide the precious costumes and offerings that made proper worship possible, to maintain private shrines whose upkeep represented a significant portion of your inherited wealth. The calendar governing your religious duties was as complex as the one tracked by the priests, requiring you to remember dozens of festivals, each with specific requirements for dress, behavior, and financial contribution. Consider the psychological burden of living constantly under such intensive scrutiny and expectation. Every word you spoke was analyzed for hidden meanings and political implications. Every gesture interpreted as statement of personal ambition or family allegiance. Every relationship evaluated for its potential impact on the intricate balance of imperial politics. Your family connections were matters of state importance. Your marriage negotiations resembled diplomatic treaties between sovereign powers. Your children represented potential allies or threats in games where the stakes were literally life and death. The palace environment where you spent most of your time was itself a marvel that would have amazed visitors from any civilization. Gardens filled with exotic plants from every corner of the empire created artificial ecosystems where mountain flowers bloomed alongside tropical orchids in carefully maintained microclimates. Aviaries housed birds whose feathers would eventually adorn the costumes of emperors, their songs providing soundtrack to political discussions that might determine the fate of entire provinces. The architecture itself made statements of power through scale and sophistication. Rooms large enough to house entire extended families, corridors stretching farther than most people traveled in their lifetimes, courtyards capable of accommodating ceremonies involving thousands of participants. Yet this magnificent environment also functioned as an elaborate stage, where every actor understood that a single misstep could end their performance permanently. The history of noble families was littered with examples of those who had risen too high too quickly, who had miscalculated in their political maneuvering, who had trusted the wrong allies or opposed the wrong enemies. Imperial favor could elevate minor nobles to positions of tremendous influence overnight, but that same favor could be withdrawn with equal speed, leaving families stripped of their wealth, titles, and often their lives. The dining practices of the nobility illustrate both their extraordinary privilege and the complex constraints governing even their most basic activities. Your meals included delicacies that most people would never taste, a chocolate prepared with exotic spices and honey, fruits shipped from tropical regions hundreds of miles away, meat from animals hunted in imperial preserves, maintained exclusively for noble use. Yet even these extraordinary culinary experiences were governed by strict protocols dictating not just what you could eat, but how you could consume it, who could be present during meals, and what topics of conversation were appropriate for each course. The emperor's own dining arrangements reached heights of complexity that bordered on religious ceremony. Historical accounts describe Moctezuma II being served hundreds of different dishes for each meal, prepared by specialized cooks and tasted by official food testers to prevent poisoning. He reportedly never wore the same clothes twice and bathed multiple times daily, demonstrating the extreme lengths to which imperial luxury extended while also revealing the constant anxiety about security that plagued even the most powerful individuals. The daily rhythm of noble life included participation in ceremonies that reinforced social hierarchy through religious spectacle. You were not merely an observer of these elaborate productions, but an essential performer whose presence and proper behavior helped maintain the spiritual equilibrium that kept the empire functioning. When you made offerings at the family shrine or participated in state religious festivals, you represented not just your individual interests but your entire lineage, carrying the weight of ancestral expectations and future obligations. Economic management for noble families required sophisticated understanding of systems that would challenge modern financial experts. Your wealth derived from multiple sources, tribute relationships with subordinate communities, trading privileges that granted exclusive access to certain goods or routes, ceremonial responsibilities that generated income through their proper performance, and land ownership that provided agricultural products and rent from tenant farmers. Coordinating these diverse income streams, while meeting the constant demands for ceremonial expenditure and political gift-giving, required mathematical skills and strategic thinking of the highest order. Marriage among the nobility functioned as international diplomacy, conducted on a personal scale. When you entered into matrimonial negotiations, you were not simply choosing a life partner but forging political alliances that could affect the balance of power across entire regions. Your spouse's family connections, wealth, military capabilities, and religious standing would influence your own position for generations. Children from these unions represented both the continuation of family lines and potential complications in succession disputes that could tear apart carefully maintained political coalitions. The contrast between your world and that of the market vendors we encountered earlier could hardly be more extreme or more carefully maintained. Were they worried about having enough corn to exchange for basic necessities? You debated the political implications of accepting tribute from distant provinces whose loyalty might be wavering. Were they feared market officials who might confiscate their modest goods? You navigated relationships with imperial administrators whose displeasure could cost you everything you owned. Where they struggled with simple arithmetic of survival, you managed calculations of power and influence that encompassed the fate of millions. The burden of noble education extended far beyond childhood into lifelong expectations of intellectual achievement and cultural sophistication. You were expected to maintain current knowledge in fields ranging from astronomy to poetry, to participate intelligently in discussions of law and philosophy, to compose literary works that would reflect honor on your family name. The private libraries maintained by noble families rivaled those of temples in their scope and sophistication, containing codices covering everything from historical chronicles to mathematical treatises to religious commentaries. Military service for nobility involved not just personal combat skills, but strategic planning and leadership responsibilities that could determine the outcome of campaigns affecting thousands of warriors and countless civilian populations. Noble warriors wore distinctive battle suits called tlahwithde that identified their rank and achievements while providing both protection and psychological advantage through their elaborate decoration. The number of captives taken in battle directly influenced social standing, creating incentives for personal valor that served imperial expansion while advancing individual careers. The religious responsibilities of nobility extended to private spiritual practices that consumed significant time and resources. You maintained elaborate household shrines requiring daily attention, sponsored religious education for community children, and participated in complex ceremonial cycles that marked seasonal transitions and astronomical events. These obligations were not viewed as burdens, but as essential contributions to the cosmic order that sustained all existence. As evening approached, and the day's formal duties concluded, you might have hoped for respite from the constant performance required by your elevated status. But even in the supposed privacy of your chambers, servants observed your behavior for signs of illness or political mood changes. Family members calculated your reactions for indicators of future opportunities or threats. And imperial spies gathered information that might prove useful in the complex calculations of palace politics. The Spanish conquest, when it finally arrived, revealed the fundamental vulnerability of even the most privileged positions in Aztec society. The nobles who had lived like gods among mortals found themselves reduced to subjects of foreign masters who understood neither their sophisticated culture nor their remarkable achievements. The featherwork that had represented generations of artistic perfection was dismissed as primitive decoration. The poetry that had captured profound philosophical insights was ignored as incomprehensible babbling. The political wisdom that had governed vast territories was discarded as irrelevant superstition. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of noble life in the Aztec Empire was its essential impermanence, despite all appearances of permanence and divine sanction. The same imperial power that elevated families could destroy them without warning. The same religious system that justified aristocratic privilege could condemn individual actions as cosmic violations. The same political networks that supported ambitious projects could turn against their former beneficiaries with devastating effectiveness. In the end, the noble life of the Aztec Empire offers us profound meditation on the nature of privilege itself and the hidden costs of apparent advantage. These individuals enjoyed material comforts and social status that most humans throughout history could never imagine. Yet they paid for these benefits with forms of spiritual and psychological imprisonment that limited their freedom as effectively as any physical constraint. They lived surrounded by beauty and luxury that modern wealth can barely approximate. Yet they were never free to simply enjoy these advantages without constant calculation, performance, and awareness that their elevated position made them perpetual terts in struggles where power was the only security. Their days overflowed with ceremony and significance. Yet they could never experience simple, spontaneous joy without considering its political implications. They commanded the labor and obedience of thousands, yet they remained themselves commanded by forces beyond personal control: the emperor's will, the gods' demands, the inexorable requirements of maintaining systems that elevated them only by binding them ever more tightly to elaborate networks of obligation and constraint. As we prepare to leave this world of feathers and gold, of ritual magnificence and hidden anxiety, of cosmic privilege and earthly imprisonment, we carry with us questions about what it truly means to live well, and what prices we accept for the advantages we enjoy. The Aztec nobles achieved everything that wealth and power could provide in their world, yet their existence reminds us that elevation often comes with isolation, that privilege frequently demands performance, and that those who seem to have everything may be the ones with the least freedom to simply be human. Conclusion. Our journey through the world of the Aztecs comes to its close as the night deepens around us, carrying with it the echoes of a civilization that was both magnificent and terrible, sophisticated and brutal, beautiful and tragic. From the aching feet of market vendors to the golden prisons of nobility, from the cosmic calculations of calendar priests to the impossible choices of emperors, we have witnessed a world where every comfort came with its corresponding burden, every privilege with its particular form of suffering. The market vendor struggling with unsold corn, the emperor watching his gods depart, the priest calculating the movements of planets, the noble wearing feathers worth more than entire villages. Each lived within the same system, each played their part in maintaining a civilization that demanded everything from its participants while offering no guarantees of security, happiness, or even survival. Perhaps what strikes us most profoundly about this vanished world is how completely it was integrated, how the cosmic order influenced daily commerce, how religious beliefs shaped political decisions, how individual fate was understood to be inseparable from collective destiny. The Aztecs created a civilization where nothing existed in isolation, where every action rippled through multiple layers of meaning, where the movement of planets and the price of corn were understood to be parts of the same grand design. This integration came at a cost that modern minds can barely comprehend: the freedom to choose one's own path, to question fundamental assumptions, to live according to personal rather than cosmic imperatives. These liberties that we take for granted were simply unthinkable in a world where every day brought new evidence that individual will must submit to larger forces beyond human control. Yet there was also something magnificent in their attempt to create a unified understanding of existence, to build a civilization where art and astronomy, politics and religion, daily life and cosmic purpose were all understood as parts of a single, coherent whole. Their failure, if we can call the Spanish conquest a failure rather than simply a collision with forces they could not have anticipated, was not a failure of vision but a confrontation with a different vision, one backed by technologies and diseases that made resistance futile. As you settle into the comfort of your own bed, surrounded by the security of a world where market inspectors cannot seize your possessions, where calendar priests do not determine your fate, where emperors do not command your worship, where nobles do not monopolize beauty and learning, you might feel grateful for the freedoms that separate your life from theirs. The ability to sleep without calculating tomorrow's survival, to wake without immediately donning the costume of your social role, to live according to your own rhythms rather than cosmic cycles. These are privileges that the Aztecs, for all their architectural achievements and mathematical sophistication, never knew. But perhaps in the quiet moments before sleep claims you completely, you might also feel a small touch of loss for what disappeared when their world ended. The sense that time itself has meaning, that individual lives participate in cosmic significance, that beauty and ceremony and ritual propriety matter as much as practical efficiency. These convictions, whether we share them or not, represented humanity's attempt to live as something more than mere animals seeking survival. The great market of Tlatelolco lies buried now beneath Mexico City's streets, its voices silenced, its bargains concluded, its struggles forgotten, except in the fragments that archaeologists recover and historians attempt to reconstruct. Moctezuma's palace has crumbled into dust. The calendar stone rests in a museum, and the featherwork of the nobles has faded in exhibitions far from the temples where it once caught the light of ceremonial fires. But in remembering their world, in trying to understand how they lived and thought and suffered and dreamed, we participate in the most human of activities, the attempt to bridge the gap between ourselves and others, to find connection across the centuries that separate us from those who lived and died before we were born. Their struggles were not our struggles. Their solutions would not solve our problems. Their gods do not answer our prayers. Yet in their humanity, their capacity for both cruelty and beauty, their ability to create meaning in the face of cosmic indifference, their willingness to build something magnificent despite knowing it would not last forever, we recognize something that connects us across all the differences of time and culture and belief. Sleep well, knowing that your rest comes without the weight of cosmic responsibility, without the fear of imperial displeasure, without the burden of maintaining divine favor through human sacrifice. But dream, perhaps, of a world where every sunrise was understood to be a victory won through ceremony, where every market day was a small triumph of human cooperation, where every individual life was understood to participate in a story larger than personal survival. The Aztecs built their empire on the shores of a lake that has long since been drained, their temples on foundations that have shifted with the centuries, their understanding of the universe on assumptions that we no longer share, but their attempt to live meaningfully in a dangerous world, to create beauty in the face of suffering, to find their place in a cosmos that seemed both magnificent and threatening. This attempt continues in each of us who seek to understand our own place in the vast and puzzling story of human existence. Rest now, and let the night carry away the weight of their vanished world, leaving you free to wake in your own time, to your own challenges, carrying with you only the reminder that humans have always struggled to live well, and that their struggles, different as they were from ours, were no less real, no less important, and no less worthy of our understanding and our respect.